A few years ago, I met a man I'll call David. We happened to be sitting next to each other in the waiting room of a small medical office. Neither of us seemed to be in a hurry. Like most conversations between strangers, it began with the usual questions. How has your day been? What do you do? Have you lived here long? Nothing remarkable, just two people passing the time. David looked to be in his late 60s. He had kind eyes, the kind that suggested he had experienced both great joy and great disappointment. There was something peaceful about him. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He wasn't trying to prove anything. As we continued talking, our conversation slowly drifted away from work and toward life. I've always found that interesting. Sometimes, the most meaningful conversations begin with the simplest questions. So almost without thinking, I asked him one. If you could go back and speak to your younger self, what advice would you give? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked down at his hands. A gentle smile appeared on his face, not the smile of someone remembering happier days. The smile of someone who had made peace with them. After what felt like a long silence, he finally spoke. I wouldn't tell him how to make more money. I wouldn't tell him how to become more successful. I'd tell him not to waste so much time believing he had more time. For a moment, I didn't know what to say. There was no sadness in his voice, no bitterness, only clarity. The kind of clarity that often comes only after many years of living. I asked him what he meant. He looked at me and said, when you're young, you believe life is generous. You think there will always be another opportunity. Another birthday, another Christmas, another anniversary, another chance to tell someone you love them, another chance to say you're sorry, another chance to begin the dream you've been postponing. But life never promised any of those things. It only gave us today. His words settled over me in a way I hadn't expected, not because they sounded profound, but because they sounded true. Over the years, I've met people who built successful businesses, people who accumulated wealth, people who traveled the world, people who achieved goals that many only dream about. Yet when they spoke honestly about their lives, their greatest regrets were rarely about the risks they had taken. More often, they spoke about the risks they never took, the conversations they kept postponing, the people they assumed would always be there, the dreams they quietly placed on a shelf, telling themselves, maybe next year. That afternoon, David said something else I'll never forget. He leaned forward slightly, looked around the waiting room, and quietly said, everyone in this room is carrying something. Some are carrying hope, some are carrying pain, and some are carrying regrets they've never spoken about to another person. I looked around the room. A young couple sat together in silence. An elderly woman was reading a magazine. A man in a business suit stared at the floor. None of us knew each other's stories. Yet David's words made me wonder, how many invisible battles are being fought by the people we pass every day? How many smiles are hiding sorrow? How many successful people quietly wonder what their lives might have looked like if they had chosen differently? Then David smiled again. You know, people think regret belongs to old age. It doesn't. It begins the moment we convince ourselves we'll always have tomorrow. That sentence stayed with me long after we left that waiting room, because the more I reflected on it, the more I realized he was right. Regret doesn't suddenly appear when we're 70 years old. It grows quietly. One postponed conversation at a time. One opportunity we let pass. One apology we never make. One dream we convince ourselves can wait. Until one day, we look back and wonder where all the years went. Perhaps that's why regret is one of the most universal human experiences. It doesn't matter who you are, where you were born, how much money you've earned, or how successful you've become. If you've lived long enough, you've probably asked yourself, what if? What if I had been a little braver? What if I had started sooner? What if I had forgiven sooner? What if I had said the words that needed to be said? That simple conversation with David changed something in me. It made me realize that regret isn't just an emotion. It's a window into what we value most. It reveals the people, the dreams, the moments, and the opportunities that mattered enough to stay with us. But it also left me with another question. If regret is such a universal part of being human, why does the mind refuse to let certain moments go? Why do some memories quietly fade away, while others return again and again, sometimes years, or even decades later? The answer lies deep within the remarkable way our minds are designed, and understanding it may change the way you think about your own regrets forever. Before we continue, if these conversations help you see yourself and your life a little more clearly, I'd like to invite you to join us. Here at the Wisdom Principles, we explore the psychology behind our choices, our relationships, our emotions, and the timeless wisdom that helps us live more meaningful lives. If that speaks to you, consider subscribing and becoming part of this growing community. Now, let's discover why our minds keep looking back. On my drive home that day, I couldn't stop thinking about what David had said, not because his story was extraordinary, but because it was so ordinary. And perhaps that's exactly why it mattered. Over the years, I've noticed something curious about people. We rarely spend years replaying our happiest memories. We don't usually lie awake at night, thinking about the vacation that went perfectly, or the promotion we received, or the day everything worked out exactly as we had hoped. Instead, our minds return to the conversations that ended badly, the opportunities we didn't take, the words we never spoke, the chances we let quietly slip away. Why? Why does one moment from 20 years ago still have the power to visit us today? The Austrian psychiatrist Viktor Frankl once wrote, "When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves." I believe those words capture something profoundly human. Because regret almost always begins with something we cannot change. The past, we cannot return to it. We cannot rewrite it. We cannot ask for one more conversation, one more opportunity, or one more goodbye. And yet, our minds keep returning there, not because they enjoy suffering, but because they are searching for meaning. Modern psychology gives us an interesting explanation. Our brains are designed to learn. Every experience, every success, every disappointment teaches us something. When an experience feels incomplete, or when we believe a different decision might have produced a better outcome, our minds continue revisiting it. Almost as if they're trying to solve a puzzle. Psychologists call this counterfactual thinking. It's our tendency to imagine an alternative version of reality. If only I had accepted that opportunity. If only I'd spoken up. If only I'd left sooner. If only I'd stayed. Every one of us has our own version of those words. But here's what many of us don't realize. The life we imagine is almost never the life that would have happened. Our minds quietly edit the story. They remove the uncertainty. They erase the sacrifices. They ignore the unexpected difficulties. We imagine the perfect relationship, the perfect career, the perfect decision. But every road, even the one we didn't choose, contains its own disappointments. The truth is, we're not comparing reality with another reality. We're comparing reality with imagination. And imagination usually wins. Researchers have spent decades studying regret. One of the most consistent findings is this. In the short term, people often regret the mistakes they made. The words spoken in anger, the impulsive decisions, the opportunities that didn't work out. But as the years pass, those regrets often become less painful. The regrets that remain are usually different. They're the opportunities we never pursued, the business we never started, the person we never told we loved, the journey we always planned to take, the talent we never developed, the dream we kept postponing because we believed there would always be another year. Action usually gives us an answer. Even when we fail, we learn, we adapt. Eventually, we move forward. but inaction leaves the story unfinished. The question remains, what would have happened if I had tried? Perhaps that's why unanswered questions can stay with us for decades. But as I reflected on David's story, I began to understand something. He wasn't haunted by failure. He was haunted by hesitation. He wasn't grieving the chances he had taken. He was grieving the ones he never gave himself. Maybe that's why fear can be so dangerous. It rarely says, "Don't do it." Instead, it whispers, "Not today." Wait until you're more confident. Wait until life settles down. Wait until the timing is perfect. Those words sound sensible, responsible even, but life has a habit of moving while we're waiting. One ordinary day becomes another. 1 year quietly becomes 5, then 10. And before we realize it, the future we've been waiting for has quietly become the past. So let me ask you something. Is there something you've been postponing, not because you can't do it, but because you're waiting to feel completely ready? A conversation, a dream, a decision, a new beginning. Hold on to that thought. Because in the next part of our journey, we're going to discover something remarkable. The greatest regrets people carry through life are rarely about money or success. They're about time, relationships, dreams, and the courage to become the person they were always meant to be. Before we continue, if these conversations are helping you understand yourself, and perhaps even see your own life a little differently, I'd love to invite you to subscribe. Every week here at the Wisdom Principles, we explore the deeper questions that shape the human experience. Not just to understand life, but to live it with greater wisdom. Now, let's explore the regrets that quietly shape us all. A father once told me something that I don't think I'll ever forget. He wasn't looking for sympathy. In fact, by most people's standards, he had lived a successful life. He had built a thriving business, provided well for his family, put his children through school, and created opportunities he himself never had growing up. He had achieved everything he had set out to achieve, or so he thought. One afternoon, while cleaning out his attic, he came across an old cardboard box. Inside were hundreds of family photographs. Birthdays, school plays, family vacations, Christmas mornings, little league games, graduation ceremonies. As he turned each page, he smiled. Then, he became very quiet. There was something missing from many of those photographs. Him. He wasn't behind the camera. He wasn't standing beside his children. He wasn't sitting in the audience. He was at work, working overtime, meeting clients, building the future he believed his family deserved. He looked at me and said, "I thought I was giving my children everything." Then he paused, but I slowly realized the one thing they wanted most was me. Those words stayed with me, because they reveal something many of us don't recognize until much later. There is a difference between providing for the people you love and being present with the people you love. Both are important. Both require sacrifice. But only one creates memories that can never be replaced. Money can always be earned again. Businesses can be rebuilt. Careers can change. But your daughter's first recital only happens once. Your son's first baseball game only happens once. The evening your child asks you to read one more story before bed only happens once. Life rarely announces its most important moments. They arrive disguised as ordinary days. Ordinary conversations. Ordinary dinners around the table. Ordinary walks through the park. We often believe the extraordinary moments define our lives. But when people look back, it's usually the ordinary moments they miss the most. The laughter around the dinner table, the unexpected hugs, the conversations in the car, the bedtime stories, the weekends that seemed so ordinary until they were gone. Perhaps that's one of regret's greatest lessons. While we're busy preparing for life, life is quietly happening. That father wasn't asking for another promotion. He wasn't wishing for a larger home. He wasn't hoping for a nicer car. He wanted one more ordinary afternoon, when his children were still young enough to hold his hand. One more bedtime story. One more family dinner. One more chance to notice that the life he had been working so hard to build was already unfolding right in front of him. Maybe that's why time is life's most valuable gift. Not because we can save it, but because once it's gone, no amount of success can ever buy it back. So let me ask you something. When was the last time you were completely present with the people you love? Not checking your phone, not thinking about tomorrow, not rushing to the next task, simply there, because years from now, it's very unlikely you'll regret spending too much time with the people who mattered most. But many people regret believing they could always make time later. And later has a habit of arriving much sooner than we expect. Not every regret is measured by the time we didn't spend. Some are measured by the words we never said. I once met two brothers whose lives reminded me how fragile our relationships can be. Growing up, they were inseparable. They played together, worked together, celebrated every milestone together. If one succeeded, the other celebrated as though the achievement were his own. They weren't just brothers. They were best friends. Then, something changed. Not because of one great betrayal, not because one stopped loving the other. It began with a misunderstanding, a few careless words spoken in frustration, assumptions that were never explained, pride that quietly took the place of humility. Days became weeks, weeks became months, months slowly became years. Every birthday, one of them thought about making the call. Every Christmas, he wondered if this would be the year they would finally reconcile. But then another thought always followed. There will be another opportunity. There will be more time. So he waited. And his brother waited too, both believing the other would eventually take the first step. Then, one morning, the phone rang. His brother had suffered a sudden heart attack. By the time he reached the hospital, it was too late. As he shared his story with me, his eyes filled with tears, not because of the argument. That no longer mattered, not because of who had been right. He couldn't even remember exactly how the disagreement had started. What he remembered was every opportunity he had allowed to pass, every phone call he never made, every message he never sent, every chance he had to simply say, "Let's talk." He looked at me and quietly said, "I always believed there would be another tomorrow. I never imagined one day tomorrow would stop coming." I don't think I've ever forgotten those words. Because how many relationships quietly drift apart, not through hatred, but through silence? How many friendships slowly disappear, because both people are waiting for the other to reach out first? How many families remain divided, because pride convinces us that being right is more important than being together? The truth is, most broken relationships don't end in one dramatic moment. They fade through small moments of hesitation, one call postponed, one apology delayed, one conversation avoided, until distance quietly becomes normal. Perhaps that's why forgiveness requires courage, not because it's easy, but because it asks us to value the relationship more than our pride. Don't. I've often wondered how many people are carrying the weight of words they never spoke. I forgive you. I'm sorry. I was wrong. I miss you. I love you. Simple words. Yet sometimes, the hardest words we'll ever say. If someone came to you today and told you that tomorrow wasn't guaranteed, who would you call before the day ended? Who would you embrace? Who would you forgive? Who would finally hear the words you've been carrying in your heart? Life doesn't promise us perfect timing. It only gives us this moment. Perhaps wisdom is recognizing that the right time to heal a relationship is usually sooner than we think. Because one day, today will become yesterday. And the conversations we keep postponing may quietly become the regrets we carry for the rest of our lives. Not all regrets involve people. Some involve the person we might have become. A man once told me about a dream he carried for more than 30 years. Ever since he was young, he wanted to write a book, not because he hoped to become famous, not because he expected to earn a fortune. He simply believed he had a story worth sharing. Every January, he bought a brand new notebook, and every January, he made the same promise. This is the year. But life always seemed to interrupt. Work became busier. The children needed him. Bills had to be paid. There were responsibilities, deadlines, unexpected expenses. He convinced himself that waiting was the responsible thing to do. After all, there would always be next year. Then next year became 5, 5 became 10. 10 quietly became 20. One afternoon, while cleaning out a closet, his daughter found a stack of those notebooks. She smiled as she flipped through them. Every single page was blank. She looked at her father and asked, "Dad, I thought you were writing a book." He laughed, but it wasn't the laughter of someone amused. It was the laughter of someone who had just met the truth. Later that evening, he admitted something that changed the way I think about fear. I wasn't waiting for more time. I was waiting to stop being afraid. Afraid that no one would read it. Afraid that people would criticize it. Afraid that it wouldn't be good enough. So he disguised fear as preparation. He called it responsibility. He called it patience. He called it waiting for the right season. But underneath every excuse was the same quiet emotion. Fear. I've often noticed something about fear. It rarely tells us to give up completely. That would be too obvious. Instead, it whispers something much more convincing. Not yet. You're not ready. Wait until you know more. Wait until life settles down. Wait until the timing is perfect. Those words sound wise. They sound careful. Sometimes they even sound responsible. But if we're not careful, they quietly become the soundtrack of an unlived life. Years pass. Circumstances change. The dream remains exactly where we left it. Waiting. The remarkable thing is that most dreams don't disappear overnight. They slowly fade beneath the weight of postponement. Not because we stopped caring, but because we convinced ourselves there would always be another opportunity. Eventually, that man did write his book. He was in his 60s when he finally began. Someone congratulated him for following his dream. He smiled and replied, "I wish I had discovered years ago that courage doesn't arrive before you begin. It arrives because you begin." I think about those words often, because how many of us are waiting for confidence before taking the first step? How many are waiting to feel fearless before making the decision that could change their lives? The truth is, confidence is rarely the beginning of the journey. It's usually the reward for taking the first step. Perhaps that's one of regret's greatest lessons. The perfect moment we're waiting for may never come, but today's imperfect moment might be all we've ever needed. So let me ask you something. What dream have you been postponing? What conversation? What business? What book? What calling? What new beginning have you placed on hold while waiting for the right time? Maybe the right time isn't someday. Maybe it's sooner than you think. Not every regret comes from the choices we make. Sometimes it comes from the choices we never believed we were allowed to make. A woman once shared a story with me that I've never forgotten. From the outside, her life looked almost perfect. She had a respected career, a comfortable home, financial security. People admired her. Many even told her they wished they had her life. She would smile politely, thank them, and quietly change the subject. As we talked, I noticed something. Every important decision she described seemed to begin with the same words. My parents wanted. My family thought. My friends believed. My colleagues expected. Very rarely did she say, I wanted. When she was young, she loved to paint. Hours would disappear as she sat in front of a blank canvas. It wasn't about becoming famous. It wasn't about selling paintings. It was simply the place where she felt most alive. But as graduation approached, people around her offered well-meaning advice. Art isn't practical. You need something stable. Be realistic. She listened. She chose the safer path. Years passed. She built a successful career, received promotions, earned respect, achieved every goal that others had set for her, yet something inside her remained strangely quiet. One rainy afternoon, while organizing old boxes in her basement, she found a small sketchbook she hadn't opened in decades. Inside were drawings she had made as a teenager. She sat there, turning one page after another. Then she whispered something so quietly, I almost didn't hear it. I remember her. For a moment, I wasn't sure what she meant. She smiled gently, touched one of the sketches. and said, "The young woman who drew these, she believed anything was possible." I miss her. Those words stayed with me because I realized she wasn't grieving lost talent. She was grieving the version of herself she had slowly left behind. How many people wake up one day and realize they've spent years becoming successful without ever feeling fulfilled? How many have built lives that look impressive from the outside, while quietly wondering why something still feels missing? There is nothing wrong with listening to wise advice. There is wisdom in learning from those who have walked before us. But there is also a danger. If we spend our entire lives trying to become the person everyone else expects, we may never discover the person we were created to be. Perhaps one of life's greatest tragedies is not failure. It is reaching the top of the wrong mountain, achieving goals that were never truly yours, living a life that earns applause from everyone else, while leaving your own heart strangely silent. Years later, that woman began painting again, not because she wanted recognition, not because she expected success. She painted because she finally understood something. Joy doesn't always come from achieving more. Sometimes it comes from returning to the parts of ourselves we abandoned along the way. Before we said goodbye, she left me with one final thought. I can't change the years behind me, but I still have a choice about the years ahead. I believe that's where wisdom begins. Not in pretending we have no regrets, but in refusing to allow yesterday to decide the rest of our lives. So perhaps the question isn't, who did life expect you to become? Perhaps the better question is, who are you becoming now? Because as long as there is breath in your lungs, there is still time to choose differently. There is still time to begin again. There is still time to become the person you were always meant to be. Before we continue, if these conversations are helping you reflect on your own life, I'd like to invite you to become part of this community. Here at the Wisdom Principles, we believe that some of life's most important conversations deserve more than a few seconds of attention. If these stories have encouraged you, challenged you, or reminded you of what truly matters, consider subscribing. Every week, we explore the timeless principles that help us understand ourselves, our relationships, and the choices that shape our lives. Now, after everything we've explored together, there's one final question we need to answer. What do we do with our regrets? Because understanding regret is only the beginning. The real transformation begins when regret becomes wisdom. What does that really mean? How does regret become wisdom? It begins with a simple decision. The decision to stop asking, "What if?" and start asking, "What now?" Those two questions lead us down very different paths. What if keeps us looking backward. What now invites us to move forward. One keeps us trapped in a story that can never be rewritten. The other reminds us that another chapter is still waiting to be written. Every person we've talked about today reached that crossroads. David could have spent the rest of his life wishing he had made different choices. Instead, he chose to share what those choices had taught him. The father who missed so many moments with his children couldn't relive their childhood. But he chose to become fully present with his grandchildren. The brother who lost the opportunity to reconcile began reaching out to the people still in his life. He refused to let one regret become the pattern for every relationship that followed. The man who postponed his dream for decades finally picked up the pen. Not because he believed it was too late, but because he realized the only thing worse than starting late is never starting at all. And the woman who had spent years living according to everyone else's expectations returned to the paintbrush she had abandoned, not to recover the years she had lost, but to make the years she still had meaningful. Do you notice the pattern? None of them were given another chance to change yesterday. What changed was the way they chose to live today. Perhaps that's what wisdom really is. Not knowing all the answers. Not living without mistakes, but allowing yesterday's lessons to become tomorrow's decisions. Maybe that's why regret exists. Not to punish us, but to wake us up. to remind us that life is happening now, not next year, not when everything is finally in place, now. Because while we cannot choose the past, we can always choose our next step. And perhaps that's the greatest gift regret can ever give us, not another chance to rewrite the past, but another chance to live the present differently. Think about the people we've met throughout this conversation. David, the father, the two brothers, the man who finally wrote his book, the woman who found her way back to painting. On the surface, their stories were very different ages, different dreams, different lives, yet they all discovered the same truth. Life isn't changed by looking backward, it's changed by deciding what you'll do after looking back. Perhaps that's why the most meaningful question isn't, what do you regret? The more meaningful question is, what has your regret taught you? Has it taught you to love more openly? To forgive more quickly? To begin before you feel completely ready? To spend more time with the people who matter most? To stop waiting for the perfect moment and start appreciating the ordinary moments that quietly become life's greatest memories? If the answer is yes, then your regret has already begun its transformation into wisdom. Before we finish, I'd like to ask you one final question. Imagine yourself many years from now. Imagine looking back on the life you're living today. What do you hope your future self will thank you for? Not what you earned, not what you owned, but who you became. Because in the end, people rarely remember us for our possessions. They remember our kindness, our courage, our character, the way we made them feel, the love we gave, the time we shared, and the difference we made while we were here. So don't wait. Make the call. Take the first step. Say the words. Forgive. Begin. Live. Because every ordinary day you are given is another opportunity to become the person your future self will be grateful you chose to be. If today's conversation has encouraged you or reminded you of something you've been meaning to do, I hope you won't simply remember it. I hope you'll act on it, and if you believe someone else could benefit from this conversation, share it with them. Sometimes one thoughtful conversation, at exactly the right moment, can change the direction of an entire life. And if you haven't already, I'd love to invite you to subscribe and become part of our community. Here at the Wisdom Principles, we believe that knowledge gives us information. Understanding gives us perspective, but wisdom is what transforms the way we live. Thank you for spending this time with me. Until our next conversation, take care of yourself, take care of the people you love, and never stop choosing the life you'll one day be proud to remember.